Welcome, bienvenidos todos al webinar.
Welcome to the webinar, Mining of the Americas and Economic Recovery After COVID-19. This webinar is held by the Mining Ministry Conference from the Americas and CAMMA, and the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, Minerals, Metals, and Sustainable Development, IGF. My name is Sarudiansky. I am part of the CAMMA coordination, and I will be hosting and leading this webinar. As you know, this webinar is going to have the presentation of 3 panelists, and after that, there will be an exchange of opinion between all the participants. The first panelist who is going to talk is going to be about the IGF's COVID-19 response. It will be on hands of Greg Radford. Greg is the Intergovernmental Forum Director on Mining, Minerals, Metals, and Sustainable Development.
Thank you, Roberto. I appreciate the introduction, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our forum. The IGF and CAMMA are pleased to co-host this event. We're very excited to have you join us, and I'd like to also welcome not only the participants, but our esteemed speakers from Government of Canada and Government of Ecuador, who will share their experiences of their government's responses to COVID in the mining sector. We've worked with CAMMA for many years now. We have a great relationship, and we're really excited to continue this partnership. So we thank everybody for joining, and let's get started. Next, David. So at the IGF, we've been looking at this important issue of the pandemic and government's response. And we've been looking at what are the potential policy impacts of the pandemic on our government members, and what are some of the policy responses. And so when we were looking at the issue and the impacts, we focused on 3 priority areas: the impacts of COVID on employment in mining, on mining tax policy and government responses, as well as artisanal and small-scale mining. I'll talk briefly about all 3 of those areas and just give you a sense of what the IGF has been doing and what we plan to do going forward. On the screen in front of you, you'll see the link to the IGF website. So it's igfmining.org, and under COVID-19 response series, you'll see all the information that I talk about in the subsequent slides. So next, so when we talk about employment in mining, I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all. So many mining sites have had to close. Some mine sites have had to reduce employment. Some employees have been laid off. Some companies have continued payroll even with shutdowns and/or decreased in production. Supply chains have been significantly impaired and impacted from lockdowns. This has had a huge impact in many of IGF member countries in the developing economies that are mineral rich. And in some countries, upwards of 15% of their national incomes come from the mining sector. So it's very important. And so lockdowns and shutdowns have a huge impact on employment. And so we've been looking at this issue and looking at what the impacts are. We, as you can see, we created a briefing paper on what are the impacts of employment on mining. We published that on our website in English, French, and Spanish. We've held webinars looking at COVID and impact on local procurement. We've had in June looking at the kind of the impacts, responses, and the future outlook on employment. Going forward, we're looking at, we're having a blog, a guest blog from Industrial, the global union, looking at the employment issue from a union perspective. And then our next webinar will be held in mid-August on the future of mining and and what that means from technology perspective. So we've been holding, as I said, we've been holding webinars trying to facilitate dialogue among our members about what these impacts are and what potential responses are related to employment and mining. Another area where we've been working next is related to mining tax responses. We've published some guidance on potential options for governments for policy responses. And every government and every country is different. Policy responses need to be different. We'll hear from Canada and Ecuador about their different approaches. Approaches and policy responses have been sector-wide. They've been company-specific. Commodities have been impacted significantly differently. Some have fared better, such as gold, some not so much. So we've been looking at this issue and holding, as I said, producing some guidance and webinars we held in April, May, and in English, French, and Spanish to provide that forum for governments to talk about what their policy responses are and what good policy response looks like. How can governments prioritize their policy responses to significantly address those that are most in distress? There's a wide range of policy responses that are out there for governments. It can range from tax credits for healthcare expenditures, deferred payroll taxes, to value-added taxes. So when we look at these issues, we look at it from a government response perspective, and it's really looking at what are the suite of options available to governments and share best practices among the governments and what they're doing. A related topic that we've been looking at is the issue of force majeure in mining contracts. And what's interesting is that this is a bit of a double-edged sword because there could be situations where companies claim force majeure from actions taken by governments to curtail the pandemic. But likewise, or conversely, I should say, governments may also make similar claims to defend the actions that they have taken. So looking at the force majeure and mining contracts is something that we've been helping to facilitate dialogue. An example is in the West African Economic and Monetary Union, and we helped facilitate a dialogue among its members on this very topic in June. And we've also been invited to speak in a number of different forums. So it's an area in which IGF continues to work. Next, David. I wanted to also mention here a new program, a new project launch that the IGF is working on called the Future of Resource Taxation. So rethinking how mining contributes to public finances in developing countries. So the purpose of the work that we're looking at in resource taxation is how can we help convene a dialogue to identify a more stable and equitable fiscal regime. You're seeing at the OECD, for example, initiatives on digital tax and trying to provide a fair tax regime for the digital economy. So this is happening across all sectors, and as governments are incurring larger debts to handle this pandemic, what does the future of their tax base look like going forward? And resource taxation is similar to other sectors as well. So what we're looking at doing is providing a dialogue, a platform for multi-stakeholders to discuss these issues and how can things move forward in a collaborative way to help identify what the future of resource taxation could look like. So we're just starting this, and please stay tuned, and we have a lot of information on our website. Next, David. So the third area that I mentioned is related to artisanal small-scale mining. And our research shows that there are over 40 million people working and relying on artisanal small-scale mining for their livelihoods. So when we talk about ASM and at the IGF, we talk about it as a livelihood issue. Many work in very vulnerable conditions, and the pandemic has created even greater stress on those conditions. Limited access to healthcare, food security issues, loss of income, There's also been quite significant impacts in value in supply chains. And so even if some artisanal miners have been able to mine gold, for example, they haven't been able to get it to market. Or if they can get it to market, they haven't been able to get market prices for their products. So it's a really significant issue for artisanal small-scale miners, and an issue that's really important for the IGF and our members. So we've undertaken some member surveys. We started this in June into July, and we're surveying our members to collect information on how are they addressing support to the sector through the pandemic. How are they helping miners, and how are they helping communities? We're going to pull all this information together, and we're going to host webinars with our members to share this information, this collection, peer learning, and we'll have these webinars in English, French, and Spanish. We'll have a webinar in August with our partners at CAMMA on this very topic. And so we'll bring this new research together, and we'll share that with all our members. We're then going to take that information and create a briefing note, which takes all the webinar information, the new research that we have, and kind of compile this together, and we'll share that publicly. That will then lead into a dialogue that we'll have at our annual general meeting, which will happen in October. So if we go to my final slide, I just wanted to mention that the IGF's 16th annual general meeting will be hosted virtually for the very first time. As many of you know, we've held our AGMs every year in Geneva, hosted by UNTAD. This year will be virtual for obvious reasons. The theme is mining and COVID-19, from crisis to sustainability. We wanted to address the issue of COVID-19 and how it's affecting the mining sector, but we didn't want to only discuss how that's affecting economies today and communities today. What we wanted to do is also have a conversation. What does that mean going forward? How do we transition from the current crisis we're in to a more sustainable mining sector? We're going to talk about a wide range of issues, many I just mentioned, from ASM to resource taxation to employment. We're going to talk about environmental management practices, gender equality. We'll have sessions that are looking at, what are the minerals and metals required for a low transition economy, as well as how do we combat climate change through the mining sector. And equally important, we'll be talking about issues of technology and innovation, and what does the future of mining look like. So please stay tuned. We have information up on the IGF website on that. Registration will be open in a few weeks. And so I want to welcome everyone to our virtual AGM, October 20th to the 22nd. So Roberto, I'm going to stop there and hand it back over to you.
Okay. Gracias, Greg. Muchas gracias por la...
Thank you, Greg, for the information about IGF's role and the activities that you have programmed for this complicated period of time for everybody. Now we are going to listen Paul Lefebvre. Paul, he's Parliamentary Secretary from the Natural Resources Ministry from Canada, and he's going to talk about the experience, Canada experience in regards to the topic we are having today. Please, Paul, I hand you the floor.
Gracias, Roberto. So
Thank
you
Roberto.
to the organizers of the Mines Ministries of the Americas Conference and the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining for the invitation to speak today. And thank you, Roberto, for the introduction. It is great to see some familiar faces, and I look forward to hearing from other presenters today. Permítanme comenzar expresando mi deseo que todos se encuentren bien en estas circunstancias extraordinarias. Lamento que no podamos reunirnos en persona, pero agradezco la oportunidad de encontrarnos en este foro para intercambiar sobre las experiencias de nuestras industrias ante las circunstancias actuales.
In the midst of the current circumstances.
Today, I will share the Canadian perspective of how COVID-19 has affected the minerals and metals industry and discuss the work related to our government's economic response. I will also outline our plans for the post-COVID-19 recovery in the minerals and metals sector, including the work we are advancing under the Canadian Minerals and Metals Plan on critical minerals and through various international partnerships. Comenzaré presentando una breve reseña del sector minero
I'm going to
canadiense
talk about
y su
the mining
contribución
sector in
sustancial
Canada and
a
its
nuestra economía.
contribution to our
Canada's mining
economy.
industry is a significant contributor to our economy, accounting for almost $100 billion of direct and indirect gross domestic product in 2018. The industry produces over 60 different mineral products and directly and indirectly employs over 625,000 Canadians. Una de las fortalezas de Canadá es la amplitud de nuestras industrias mineras, que varía desde pequeñas empresas de exploración hasta las grandes empresas mineras multinacionales, así como también una gran variedad de proveedores de equipos y servicios mineros. Mining activities also provide economic benefits to Indigenous groups across our country. With mining projects often located near northern and Indigenous communities, community members supply essential labor to the sector, and their businesses provide goods and services needed by the industry. In fact, proportionally, the mining industry is the second largest employer of Indigenous peoples by proportion in Canada. Mining provides the primary source of economic activity for many northern and remote communities, and today, there are over 400 exploration and mining agreements that focus on developing partnerships, initiatives that generate economic opportunities and wealth for surrounding communities. Mining has a significant economic footprint in all Canadian provinces and territories, and about 2/3 of our mine sites are located in over 100 countries, with a significant portion of these in the Americas region. Actualmente, el 58% de los activos mineros de Canadá en el extranjero se encuentran en América Latina y el Caribe. Estas operaciones ofrecen importantes beneficios socioeconómicos a las economías locales, lo cual incluye puestos de trabajo directos e indirectos e ingresos para los gobiernos. And the partnerships and memoranda of understanding we hold with countries in this region to advance shared priorities such as climate smart mining and public geoscience are very important to Canada's mining industry. Next slide, please. Much like in the rest of the world, Canada's mining industry has been facing unprecedented challenges due to COVID-19, affecting businesses and employees across the entire sector. Los precios de las materias primas se desplomaron significativamente a fines de marzo tras el inicio de la pandemia y la consiguiente recesión en el mercado. At the peak of the crisis in early April, 1/3 of Canada's mines had scaled back or suspended their operations. Thankfully, both operations and markets are recovering. Many mines have resumed activities, and the most commodities are on an upward, albeit slow, trajectory. A lo largo de esta crisis, nos complace observar que el sector privado de Canadá continúa mostrando liderazgo en su respuesta a la COVID-19, tanto en Canadá como en los yacimientos mineros del extranjero. For example, Trevali received government recognition in Peru for its early response to COVID-19 practices. We were also pleased to see Barrick Gold collaborating with local stakeholders in Argentina to donate testing kits, and Tech Resources Limited dedicating funds to COVID-19 recovery in addition to donating medical supplies in Chile, to name a few. Sin embargo, la industria minera de Canadá, como muchas otras, continúa
But
afrontando
Canada mining
desafíos sin
industry faces
precedentes
challenges
causados
without
por el
any precedent
COVID-19,
caused by
particularmente la
COVID-19,
absorción de costos
especially
operativos
the
más elevados
operational
por la
costs that
implementación de
increase due to
medidas
the
adicionales de
implementation
salud
of
y seguridad.
additional health
This
and
is
safety
especially true for
measures.
remote mines and those in northern Canada. And Canada's junior exploration companies, smaller firms that tend to be flexible and specialize in high-risk, early-stage exploration and financed through equity markets, have been hit particularly hard by COVID-19. Aquellas empresas con recursos financieros limitados habrán dificultades en entrar fondos de inversión en la coyuntura actual de aversión al riesgo. Even firms that do not have adequate funds may still face travel restrictions as they look to resume some type of summer exploration activities. No obstante, se anticipa que, a medida que mejore el pronóstico del mercado mundial de minerales y metales, la recuperación del sector generará aumentos graduales en el empleo. As we begin reopening our economy, we have to be mindful of the risks that COVID-19 continues to pose on mining operations in rural, remote, and indigenous communities, as well as the vulnerability of transportation networks and mining services and supplies. Moving forward, subsequent Government of Canada support for the mining industry will take into account lessons learned from our initial COVID-19 response. Because as the world begins to recover from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we recommit to our goal of building a net zero economy, Canada needs this sector more than ever. Next slide, please. El plan de respuesta económica a la COVID-19 del Gobierno de Canadá incluye dos aspectos importantes. Número uno, stabilizing the situation for Canadians and the economy. The goal is to deliver as much broad-based support as practically possible and as quickly as possible. En primer lugar, a través de un conjunto de programas dirigidos a individuos y empresas de todos los tamaños. Por ejemplo, nuestro gobierno inmediatamente puso a disposición préstamos sin intereses y con cuotas de hasta un 25% para la pequeña y mediana empresa y un subsidio salarial de emergencia para toda empresa afectada por la pandemia. We also introduced specific programs for small, medium, and large enterprises, including credit availability and loan guarantee programs, such as the Large Employer Emergency Financing Facility Program. We also announced mining sector-specific measures, extending the timelines for spending the capital raised by junior exploration companies via the flow-through shares mechanism by 12 months, providing them with a time to safely plan when to best continue their operations. Renewing the geomapping for an energy and minerals program and the targeted geoscience initiative, which both provide key pre-competitive data and knowledge for mineral exploration in Canada. This investment serves as a down payment on the Pan-Canadian Geoscience Strategy under the Canadian Minerals and Metals Plan. Number two, stimulating the economic recovery. Our work here is evolving. As we begin to reopen our economy, we are mindful of the opportunities to accelerate our work towards our green economy, fight climate change, and meet the demand for more equitable and shared prosperity. We also understand the importance of innovation and investment in mining and exploration to support these clean technology opportunities and ensure our future competitiveness. Next slide, please. A fin de complementar la respuesta directa del Gobierno de Canadá a los impactos del COVID-19, seguimos desarrollando varias iniciativas destinadas a fortalecer nuestra industria de minerales y metales. First and foremost is the Canadian Minerals and Metals Plan, or CMMP. Launched in 2019, the CMMP was informed by extensive engagement with Canada's industry, provincial and territorial governments, and Indigenous peoples. Este marco de política pan-canadiense apunta a la
This
mejorar la
policy
posición y
framework aims to
competitividad de
improve
nuestra
the position
industria,
and
a
competitivity of
ampliar
our
la
industry,
contribución
to
económica
widen
del
up
sector a lo
our
largo y
economic
ancho del
contribution
país,
to the
a
sector throughout the
fortalecer nuestra
country, to
presencia
strengthen
global
our
y a
global
aumentar
presence
nuestro
and
atractivo de
enhance
inversión.
our investment
In fact,
attractiveness.
Canada's mines ministers, the Chambers of Commerce, and others have called for the CMMP to be the primary vehicle to advance federal, provincial, and territorial efforts to boost industry competitiveness and the drive economic recovery post-COVID. The CMMP and its corresponding action plans advances 6 strategic directions to serve as the roadmap for the future of Canadian mining. Today, I would like to focus on the Global Leadership Strategic Direction, which outlines our commitment to advancing smart, responsible, and sustainable mining by investing in innovation, supporting the participation of communities and Indigenous peoples, and fighting climate change. Earlier this year, we released Action Plan 2020, the first in a series of action plans under the CMMP. Among 6 initiatives, the action plan calls for a Canada brand for mining, one that will drive home the advantages of investing in and exporting from Canada. Canada promoverá su marca país minero mediante la participación en varios foros internacionales y asociaciones bilaterales que nos permitirán compartir y avanzar las prioridades del Plan Canadiense de Minerales y Metales. In fact, we had the opportunity to share some Canadian technical expertise with Brazil's mining secretary, Alejandro Vidigal de Oliveira, when he visited our laboratories in March. We also plan to share Canadian industry's best practices in responsible and sustainable mining through the Mining Association of Canada's Towards Sustainable Mining. It's this initiative, which I should note has been adopted by Argentina and Brazil, among others. Por otra parte, el trabajo continuo de nuestros laboratorios y centros de innovaciones, como NORCAT, con sede en Sudbury, Ontario, orientado a desarrollar y demostrar tecnologías innovadoras, es otro ejemplo concreto en el avance de los objetivos de nuestro plan. We also know that there is no clean growth economy without the minerals and metals industry. El sector minero de Canadá cuenta con los materiales necesarios para desarrollar las tecnologías de energía solar, eólica y de baterías que ayudarán a Canadá y a nuestros socios globales a cumplir con los compromisos climáticos and help build a more inclusive economy. This brings me to the significance of critical minerals in Canada's post-COVID-19 economic recovery. Next slide, please. Our government sees critical minerals as a generational opportunity for Canada to build value-added industries here at home and help drive the energy transition abroad, which is why, under the CMMP, our work on critical minerals is a key priority for Natural Resources Canada. For example, CMMP Action Plan 2020 also committed to developing a pan-Canadian geoscience strategy, one that builds on our current geoscience expertise and leverages modern technology to support responsible development of Canada's geological resources, including critical minerals. De hecho, el Gobierno de Canadá recientemente renovó 2 programas, la Iniciativa de Geociencia Aplicada y la creación de mapas geográficos de energía y minerales. The knowledge acquired through these programs will be key for governments and communities to make informed decisions on land use and resource management in order to develop the mines of the future. No doubt, the COVID-19 pandemic has certainly brought home to the need for supply chain security for critical minerals. Critical minerals are the key elements needed for electric vehicles, solar panel, and other low-carbon technologies. And our closest trading partners are looking to us to become a trusted ally in securing their supply. Y sabemos que muchos de estos sectores dependen de insumos provenientes de minerales críticos. Los puntos de partida de las cadenas de suministro de equipos médicos, tecnologías limpias, manufactura, aeronáutica y defensa. This is also true for the global battery industry. Demand for the raw minerals need for batteries, such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel, is anticipated to surge in the coming years with the widespread adoption of electric vehicles. A nivel nacional, Canadá está explorando formas de impulsar la producción e incentivar las inversiones a fin de asegurar cadenas de valor de minerales críticos para nuestras industrias nacionales, así como para las necesidades de nuestros aliados que exigen mercados transparentes, fiables y responsables. But we also know that building secure global supply chains takes international cooperation. That's why Canada and the US continue to work together on the Joint Action Plan on a critical minerals collaboration. Canadá también continúa involucrando a la Unión Europea y los estados que la integran a través del diálogo sobre materias primas entre Canadá y la Unión Europea, en virtud del Acuerdo de Libre Comercio entre Canadá y Europa. And we are exploring opportunities to strengthen bilateral cooperation on critical minerals with Japan's Minister of Economy, Trade, and Industry. No doubt, these minerals are the future of the mining sector. They will lead the way to a more competitive and prosperous industry as we emerge from the challenges brought on by COVID-19. And now is the time to start building these critical mineral value chains. Next slide, please. Our ongoing partnerships with countries in the Caribbean and Central and Latin America are central to our COVID recovery. Las empresas mineras canadienses tienen más de 100,000 millones en activos mineros solo en esta región, y nuestros activos canadienses en la región registraron un crecimiento de más del 6% entre 2017 y 2018. Canadian mining companies and input providers operating in the region have the opportunity to promote and benefit from the principles and values of the CMMP plan when they operate in Canada and abroad. Collaboration between our governments, particularly through memoranda of understanding, will be critical in building a stronger global mining industry, including a través de intercambios importantes áreas de geociencia y minería inteligente en términos climáticos, incluso a través de la colaboración en proyectos, participating in industry associations and centers of innovation. For example, the Mining Association of Canada's Mining Literacy Campaign, the expansion of NORCAT's new Skill Training and Innovation Service Center in Santiago, Chile, and importantly, through the role the mining service and supply sector companies play in providing a suite of innovative technologies and services that support safer, more efficient, and environmentally sustainable mine sites. Y más allá de nuestra colaboración entre países, Canadá también integra la iniciativa de gobernanza de los recursos energéticos. Esta es una nueva iniciativa destinada a promover una buena gobernanza del sector minero y cadenas de suministro de minerales energéticos resistentes y seguras. Led by the US and including the participation of other governments, including Peru, the objectives of the ERGI complement the Government of Canada's long-standing efforts to strengthen responsible business conduct, increase transparency in the extractive sector, and ensure partner countries have the capacity to manage natural resources in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Actions under the ERGI include the recent launch of an open and accessible online toolkit for sharing knowledge and best practices in the mining sector. We look forward to continuing to participate in this initiative. En resumen, el sector de minerales canadiense ciertamente se vio afectado por la crisis del COVID-19. However, quick action by companies
However,
and authorities on the public health and safety front, cooperation with communities on interactions and re-entry procedures, and an unprecedented collection of economic stabilization measures are helping a resilient industry to weather the storm and remain competitive when the economy recovers. Guided by the priorities we have set out in the CMMP and Canada's clean growth agenda, there is no doubt that the minerals and metals sector will play an important role in Canada's economic recovery post-COVID-19. This will include providing the raw materials to drive infrastructure development, provide inputs into medical technologies, and contribute to support the social well-being and job creation. Canada y América Latina tienen el potencial para aprovechar nuestro vasto sector de minerales y metales a fin de impulsar una recuperación económica ecológica tras la pandemia de COVID-19 y juntos contribuir a la transición energética limpia. However, it is how we go about meeting this critical demand, and more specifically, how we integrate best practices in driving innovative, responsible, and sustainable mining across our operations and partnerships in this hemisphere that will dictate our success. Esto seguirá siendo una prioridad canadiense a lo largo de nuestra recuperación económica, ecológica tras el COVID-19 y hacia el futuro. Y ahora más que nunca, estamos listos para colaborar con sus respectivos países a fin de potenciar aquellos que creo que es una prioridad común. Next slide, please.
A common priority.
That concludes my presentation today. Gracias por escuchar.
Realmente vemos cómo ante el importante rol
Really, we see how this important role that Canada has, and it's linked with mining activities in Latin America, and its great importance on what's proposed in Canada in regards to the post-pandemic future. Now we're going to go to the third panelist. The third panelist is the Vice Minister of Mines of Ecuador, Fernando Benalcázar. Ecuador wants to highlight also in this current period has under its responsibility the Executive Secretariat of the Conference of Ministries of Mine in the Americas. So, Fernando, we are all ears to your presentation. Thanks, Roberto. Greeting to all the parties, to IGF, to different authorities that are joining us today. And leaving aside the role of Vice Minister of Mines as head of the department this year, we've been treating COVID internally at a level of CAMMA. We've had different meetings and we've shared our concerns and a lot of experiences, which finally get to the idea of having this international forum to share with other governments and with other stakeholders, with the industry itself, and with all those who may have a role within the mining in the Americas. My presentation is not a specific presentation about Ecuador. Indeed, I will use a couple of slides of information on how the experience in Ecuador has been the outcome of the interaction and of exchanging knowledge with other countries in regards to those discussions. For instance, we've discussed with Chile, we've adopted the protocols that Chile initially used. We've talked to people from Brazil, people from Argentina, from the Dominican Republic. So in order for me to put you into context, my presentation is in that line of talking about the context of CAM and not specifically about Ecuador. I just want to clarify that because I think it is necessary to talk about that role, not in the words of a Vice Minister of Mines. So let me share my screen with you and let's start now. I really want to thank this opportunity that we all can see a little bit what mining has been in the Americas and what the economic recovery could be in post-COVID-19. Let's indicate a global reality. The pandemic is there, is present. There's not a country in the world, even though it is rich or developed, that's prepared to handle it. The results are evident. We see that in the case of the Americas, approximately 54% of cases global-wide of COVID are in our continent, and then the rest of them are spread, and as it is obvious, towards the second most affected. And if we see in regards to the regional countries, the impact in ratio of COVID cases versus population is it's outstanding to see the figures. Chile, the United States, Peru, Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia. We've all been affected, some at a higher extent, I insist, in proportion of the population of countries. And the consequent economic impact is evident. The IMF establishes a valuation for this year of almost a GDP, a decrease of 5% or 5% negative. The impact in the Americas is relatively, I'm talking about Latin America and the Caribbean, relatively similar. Talking about Ecuador, in Ecuador, the impact is so evident in a population of 17 million inhabitants, where I can highlight that approximately 74,620 cases reported of 102,000 that have been ruled out, in more than 5,000 fatalities. The national economy has been hit because of these circumstances, which was also combined with the collapse of price of hydrocarbons. Remember that in Ecuador, the hydrocarbon sector is the product of most exports that we have. There is a decrease of GDP of around 11% for this year. It is estimated 850,000 people that will get into the condition of unemployment of this year. COVID of the numbers that we can see there in the reference, and during the start of the pandemic in the flying, it was reduced to normal activities around 2%, partially around 24%, suspended 60% of activities, and 25% of workforce continued at some point active. And in average of 1 month, $72.5 million were not exportable, stopped to be exported. So what I'm indicating in Ecuador, compared to the economies of other countries of the regions, there's no exception and no much of a difference compared to the United States and Mexico. We all have had an absolutely clear impact. Those impacts, we can summarize them in what we've gone through during the moment we're talking about stay home, in which social distancing was not an option, and that which stopped our economies, that got to a decrease of production of exports. It took to a decrease of foreign investments, therefore decrease of income and increase of expenses or expenditure for companies. The two previous colleagues referred to that. Those who started to operate in a formal increase in the way of doing business. If we start from the fact that doing a PCR test costs around $90 and we have 2,000 employees, that's a huge amount of budget that everyone has to use special protection equipment, specialized for biosecurity. That's very expensive. Decrease of employment is a logical sequence, getting from stay home towards social distancing. So we cannot have the same amount of employees as we had before when we established distancing restrictions in transport, in dining places, and in the camp or in the field. This generates an impact, and this is a reality. This is the nature of human beings. The increase of illegal mining. All countries in the regions that had illegal mining problems, taking advantage of the conditions in which the emergency of the country was demanding that. The efforts and the forces of order, the control forces were focalized in the health emergency. The increase of illegal mining was evident, and that generated a bigger problem and giving rise to the social conflict. due to lack of knowledge and concern that we all have about being infected. But we know that illegal mining is part of our lives in industry, in construction, and engineers, in generation and transmission of energies, in inputs and medical equipment depend on that. What would be of the world, or what would the world be without the mining, and especially the region that generates and exports key products or inputs for connectivity? What would the world be without us? So that's why I want to be clear in a quote that I heard from a panelist a few days ago when he was saying, without mining, there's no energy. Without energy, there's no mining, no growth, nor development. So that's common for the region, and I would say that's the real problem. Now, getting out of the stay-home mode to a social distancing mode, the most important thing is that it has allowed us, all governments that we've talked to, that we've interacted with, and I insist this is at a level of CAMMA, to encourage the transparency of sectorial information. What have we done? What do we need? How do we get together? How do we prevent? How are we better? How do we learn from one another? Without borders, without barriers, exchanging information. And we've preserved the health and security of workers, contractors, providers or vendors, and communities around different populations that are around or close to those production projects or that will reactivate their activities. Taking that into account was vital for the security of communities. Is the case of Chile, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, where because of this natural fear, they blocked our transport of inputs or of export materials, or that were thinking that the virus was also attached to the different doors of the vehicles or through the drivers. So we also learned that we must avoid the paralyzation of mining activities for longer than 90 or 100 initial days, because economies need to carry on, need to go on, but also from the government inside or scope, we need to avoid and control in a clear way to those issues, reducing business regulations, environmental laws, tax frame to attract investments was what could happen if the government did not have a clear position, and I think we've all agreed on that. And the final outcome was to reactivate activities through the use of strict return protocols. And here I want to highlight the country-country cooperation. Chile, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia. We've frequently been talking with the Minister of Mining of Chile, of Colombia. We've been talking about that. And that took us to a discussion in the CAMMA, which has been of great support. And we've all agreed that we needed to handle prevention protocols in biosecurity for the mining sector. I think we launched, and the most important thing at its moment in a timely manner, in the case of Ecuador, which I want to highlight it as a country. In May 15, we got the approval of a ladder as one baseline and as one minimum starting point, which is very demanding, but minimum, so that mining activity at all scale could be activated. It was not easy. Processes between May 15, the approval, and to see the formal reactivation and to start into production in others has taken 5 or 6 weeks. And inputs, transport, exports, because the exposure was less. But what's key? In these points that I'm highlighting here, a frame of provisions for everything regarding transport, for everything that's regarding income by workdays, everything associated with cleaning and sanitation and installment of equipment and machinery to ensuring
in transport, in places like camp areas, community areas. And the most important to me was make the workers more conscious, and communities and workers. Here I want to highlight something. Many people, they didn't see COVID as life risks until they felt life from close person. It was very common. Countries, they started, opened the doors, and they had to shut down again because the contagious level was increasing. So the key point is that these protocols, we have evolved from situations in which there is a 2% of operations when the pandemic was declared up to yesterday, 11% of regular operations. And we are moving on other operations that were partially suspended or limited, and we are evolving step by step. What has this led us? I think that in the region, COVID has taught us and left us many experiences. And I am not going to say what each country has done, but I can do it in a general way. The reduction of operation cost, it could be a consequence of the learning of systematized processes in the future. Remote control centers and autonomous machinery. And this has been implemented in countries like Chile, for example. Risk reduction for technification. And I think that we all learned how to be more qualified and have better learnings because no one knew how to handle this pandemic, and we all have learned day by day. Mining still is key and important for all of us, and we think that as we talk in general terms, that the improvement will come in the next month and year, not only in the world, but also in the important countries of the region, as we already mentioned here in these numbers. A light for national economies has turned into the variation of the commodities. I'm just going to mention the most common: gold, silver, and copper. And we see that their annual is very constant. And let's see the majority of the people seeing and projecting the increase of these commodities. And others talk about an increase of 3,000 per ounce in the next 18 months. I think we have lived a retake of gold prices that are unusual. That can allow us to continue with a sustainable, responsible mining and continue with investment, export, and generate incomes for the state. And that led us to a regional economic development, because in many cases, we are the only source of raw material in the world. And in other cases in which we have developed mining the most, we export finished minerals. And to conclude, I think the most important from this topic is that we share knowledge, and each country has reacted in a logical way, learning from the circumstances surrounding the pandemic, generating tax incentive and generating opportunities, and committed to continue growing or this sector moving, because we are not blind and we see that the role that the mining sector has is really important. But this is an incentive to continue working. I want to leave you with this image. It's evident that we took this information from American Coalition from Minerals Education Coalition. And it says each American that is born would need, and we can see the amount, if around 15 minerals and metals that are part of a human's life from the moment they were born, and probably to the moment we are put in the coffin. Mining is there to stay. I think the lesson learned from COVID is big, and CAMMA has played a significant role to share this knowledge and joint efforts for the mining for the future in the mining industry. Roberto, I'll hand you the floor again. Wow, that is a huge responsibility, Fernando. Thank you. Now, we are going to go to another stage in which officers from the countries that are in this webinar, and I would like to mention some of them. In Chile, we have Antonio Canales, Augusto Gauti, Vice Minister of Peru Mining. We have Alberto Hensi, Secretary of Mining in Argentina. We also have representatives, Agapito Rodriguez from Honduras, and we have a very wide representation from all the countries from America. And I think that together, Jaime Pachars from Panama, I apologize because I cannot mention the entire list, but we are really thankful for your presence in here today. In this new stage, or in this part of the webinar, in this section of the webinar, we want the officers from the countries provide information in regards to the topic we are discussing today in this webinar, and also exchange opinions. Taking into consideration the time we have available, we also have to thank to the panelists, and because they have handled time very well, but we ask for those that are going to participate to be, to keep it short. While we wait for the officers for them to write down the questions, a question that we would like to ask the panelists is the key role assigned to mining in the economic reactivation of the countries. If you estimate this situation will improve the perception of mining industry in front of society and their link with communities.
So certainly here in Canada, certainly as we said, the mining industry has been coming back on board. It's obviously slowed down, but when we talk about to improve the perception of the mining industry from society and its relationship with communities, certainly in Canada, it's been the focus of this relationship for a long time. However, only in recent years, in the past decade or even less, when it comes to Indigenous communities. But I'll give you my example of where I live. I live in Sudbury. So we have 9 operating mines within a 50-kilometer radius. And we have 300 small and medium-sized businesses that are in the supply and service sector of mining. So here in my community, where you have mines, people are okay with mines. The challenge is when you don't have a mine, the obviously communities that don't have a mine have major challenges to want to open up to that. However, I believe, given certainly the situation of clean tech and climate change, and as I said in my presentation, the role of minerals and metals as we obviously want to get to net zero by 2050, the community will have to obviously learn of the importance of minerals and metals as well. So the industry and governments have to play a more active role in explaining to the communities the importance of this if we want to have a clean environment. So I know it's a juxtaposition of saying mining and clean environment, and I'm saying that they go together because you cannot have one without the other. So that's kind of the message that we're relaying here in Canada. And so yes, in this post-COVID-19, and when we talk about recovery, and certainly in Canada, it will be very important that we continue to support the clean tech sector and as well as mining as we move forward, because we know it's critical to achieve our net zero goals. And at the same time, it is good for the economy and for jobs.
Gracias, Paul. ¿Alguna otra opinión de los
Thank you,
panelistas?
Paul. Any other opinion from the panelists? I would like to add a couple of ideas. And just to honor our mother language, we are going to continue speaking Spanish. I want to add that in the extractive industry in general, talking about mining in Ecuador, we saw conditions in which the opposition groups to any type of activity, extractive activity, they have used COVID to attack governments and the states, using the slogan of, while they had us distracted with the emergency and COVID-19, something or a project was being doing in the extractive sector, or this pipeline has done this or that. And that puts in perspective that we have to live and provide dialogue and interaction opportunities to all the parties involved, to all the stakeholders, but we also have to be aware that we never are going to have 100% of people happy with mining, and there will always be opposition to it. So this requires from the government and the entities to be creative, handle a complete transparency process and a formal communication process in which, as the example of the child I just mentioned, let's make people conscious that without mining, we don't have anything. There are no conditions or anything to live. I just wanted to add that. Thank you very much, Fernando. Greg, I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Roberto. I'll just add, picking up on Fernando and Paul's comments, is that, in the mining sector over the past number of years, past decade, there's been an increase in social conflicts. There's a growing trust gap between communities and the mining sector and governments. And what I find interesting, what we've been hearing from our members and what we're hearing from mining companies is that, in communities, is that during the pandemic, in a lot of communities, what they realized is they didn't really understand the full role that the mining companies played in their communities. So when these companies stepped in to help with providing PPE, help with health and safety, and help with providing social safety net through employment, even though mining companies have had to shut down and or slow production. I find it interesting that there's been a growing understanding and appreciation of the great breadth of issues and topics that mining companies deal with. They're not just pulling mineral out of the ground. They're providing a lot of social support to developing communities, and particularly in emerging countries. And so, to answer the question, Roberto, I think it is an opportunity or not an opportunity, but I think we're seeing a better understanding of the role that the mining companies play in many communities, and a greater appreciation for them. I don't think it fully closes the trust gap, but I think it's a strong opportunity for growth, looking at that over time.
Gracias, Greg. Ahora
Thank you, Greg. Now, Vice Minister Augusto Cauti is asking to talk from Peru. Augusto, please go ahead.
Sí, gracias Roberto.
Thank you, Roberto. It seems that I cannot activate my video, but you can hear me, right?
Bueno, primero felicitar nuevamente por la organización.
First, congratulations for the organization of this conference.
Tanto a
this
CAMMA como
event,
al
thanks to
IGF,
CAMMA and IGF,
para compartir estas experiencias
to share
y compartir lecciones
and share lessons,
y también ver perspectivas,
and also
¿no?
see different
Creo que como hablaban los expositores,
as the
esta ha sido
panelists
una
were
coyuntura
mentioning, this has
difícil,
been a
compleja
gap,
en
a
general
terrible situation in general.
para todos los países, ¿no? Es a
for
nivel
all
mundial
the
y obviamente
countries
la
around the
actividad
world.
minera
And
no
obviously,
está
the mining
ajena a ello.
activity is not
Si bien es
except,
cierto, la
is
actividad
not
minera
apart from this. The mining activity
goza de algunas
has
características,
some
en el
characteristics.
caso peruano, trabajar en lugares
For example, in Peru,
aislados,
to work in isolated
remotos, ¿no? Por lo menos
places,
de las
remote
grandes
areas
ciudades o
from the
urbes,
big
en espacios
cities
confinados, usando
and confined
campamentos, la
spaces,
cultura de seguridad
creating
que
or
nos ha
building
acompañado por tantos años,
tents,
las altas
and the
regulaciones, los altos estándares a los que está
regulations
acostumbrada
and
la
high
minería formal en el
standards that
país,
formal mining is used to.
las jornadas especiales de trabajo,
The
¿no? Que es algo que se
special
comparte en muchos
job or the
países,
special
además de la
shifts,
región,
and that is something many
la mayor
countries share in the
tecnología,
region. The highest
la
technology,
automatización con
the
la que cuenta la minería
automatization
moderna,
that
y eso también es
modern
aplicable a
mining
varios
has,
países de la
and that
región,
applies to
así como
different
la
countries
capacidad
in the
gerencial y
region,
logística,
and
¿no? Que
also
también
the
creo que es bien
logistic and
importante
management
en estos
capability.
momentos, ¿no?
I think that is also
Las
important in
empresas
these
mineras
moments, that the
acostumbradas a
mining
manejar
companies
proyectos
that are used to
de
handle
cientos de millones de
projects
dólares
of
y varios
over
de ellos por encima de los 1.000
100 and
millones de
1,000
dólares,
million of
están
US
acostumbradas a manejar
dollars, they
esta
are used
logística
to handle these
y
logistics
enfrentar estos
and
retos que se tienen
facing
ahora
these
de
challenges that
cómo
we have
gerenciar las
right now and
operaciones
how to
en estos
handle
momentos con
the
una,
operations
además, situación particular que
in
generan
this
estos
particular
contagios,
situation that
¿no?
this
Entonces,
spread of the virus
sin duda todo ello ha
generates.
sido un
So
reto.
there is no doubt that
Como
this
se
has been
decía,
a
también se
challenge.
han
And
presentado
as we
problemas en el
mentioned, there
camino,
have been other
lo mismo ha pasado por
problems.
acá, ya lo hemos podido compartir
And same thing has
con
happened here.
nuestros
We have
colegas en
been
la región
able
en
to
algunas
share
llamadas que hemos
these
tenido,
with
algunas
other
conferencias que
colleagues
hemos
from the
compartido,
region through calls and
y
other
sin
conferences that
duda,
we have been. But there is no
digamos,
doubt
lo
that
que sí hemos tenido que considerar mucho al
we have
comienzo, y
to
creo que es
take
también
into
aplicable a todos, es
consideration,
en
and
qué
that
situación
applies
partimos, ¿no?
to
Creo que
all
era
of us, is
importante ver en
where
cada
do we
país
start from?
también,
I
y
think
esto
it's
saliendo un
important
poco
to
del tema
see
minero,
how
en qué
everything
situación
started.
de
How was the
infraestructura sanitaria,
situation
de servicio,
in
de salud,
sanitary
partimos cuando
infrastructure,
esto
health?
ocurrió,
We
¿no? Y en
started
el caso peruano, lo que
when
el
all
gobierno ha ido
this
haciendo durante este
just
tiempo de ir
start.
contando con
And
más
the
camas
Peruvian
clínicas, con
government
más
now
servicios de
has
UCI,
more
con más
IC
respiradores y
services,
todo lo que se ha
more
ido ganando con el
ventilators,
tiempo,
and
durante el
everything
cual
that
se
we
tuvo
have
que bajar la
gained through
actividad
time,
económica,
which
¿no?
we have to
Porque
decrease
obviamente
our
partíamos en
economic
una
activity,
situación
because of
más
course
compleja de
we were in
infraestructura
a
sanitaria y
very
de salud,
more
como decía, ¿no?
complex situation
Pero
in regards
asimismo
to
creo que los
health,
retos y
for
las
example.
perspectivas
But the
están, y
challenges and
en esa línea mi
perspective
comentario
in that
termina, ¿no?
line,
Que es que sin
my
duda
comment determines
el
that
sector minero puede contribuir mucho
mining
en países
sector can
como los de
contribute
la
a
región, ¿no?
lot
Colombia,
in
Chile,
countries like
Ecuador, bueno, que no es un
Colombia,
sector
Chile,
todavía tan grande
Ecuador.
como lo
Well,
dice el mismo
however,
viceministro, más
Ecuador is
están
not a
en
big
hidrocarburos, pero
sector yet. They
están
are working
alzando en
with
este tema,
hydrocarbons, but they are
en el caso peruano, ¿no? Que sí es un
increasing their
sector,
operation. But
obviamente
for
la minería
example, in
importante por lo
Peru,
que genera en
mining is an
exportaciones,
important
en
sector because
contribución
of
de
everything that
recursos
generates in
tributarios,
export and
divisas,
tax
dinamización de economías locales.
contribution,
Y ahí
dynamization of local
también la
economies, and
resiliencia del
there,
sector está por las
resilience of the
características dichas, pero
sectors due to
también
the characteristics already
creo que el
mentioned,
hecho de tener
it is
este
very resilient.
relacionamiento
But to
externo que
have
tiene el
this
sector,
external
este
relation
relacionamiento con
that
el
the
mercado
sector
mundial,
has, this
y donde
relation
se vaya
with
viendo
the
que hay mejoras en
world
otros
market,
mercados,
and while
con
we
esta
see
resiliencia que tiene
there
el
are
sector en el
improvements in
país,
other
y
markets and the
aprovechando
resilience
todavía
that we
estos
have in the
mercados que se van
countries, and taking advantage of
reafirmando
these
o
markets that
reabriendo,
that are
el
opening
sector
or
todavía tiene
reopening,
la
the
posibilidad y la
sector still
capacidad
has the
de poder
opportunity and
contribuir en esta
capability to
recuperación económica,
contribute to
¿no?
this
Y en ese
economic
sentido,
recovery.
dejar una
In that
pregunta al
sense, I
panel,
just
¿no?
want to leave a question for the
Digamos,
panelists, and
ahí hay diversos retos, ¿no? Está el
there
tema
are
tecnológico,
different
es el tema
challenges like
laboral, ¿no? Es el tema
technology,
sanitario,
work,
pero yo
health,
dejaría quizás
but I
en
would
términos del tema
also
laboral, ¿no? Por ejemplo, todavía hay
mention
una
in
discusión
regards to
sobre
work,
estos
there is a
regímenes que tenemos
discussion
en
about the
minería
regimes that
y
we
la
have in
extensión de ellos,
mining and
obviamente
the extension
considerando
of these,
tratados o
taking
convenios
into
internacionales
consideration
como el de la OIT,
international
¿no?
treaties, for example, as
Que
the
establece límites y que
IO,
probablemente en esta
the
situación de pandemia
ILO that
a
established
veces
some
podrían ser
limits.
mejor si se
And in
amplían, ¿no?
this
¿Cuál
pandemic
es la
situation will be
visión que
better
tiene el
if
panel
these
de
are
estos temas de poder
open.
transitoriamente,
So,
¿no?
what is the vision
Poder
of the
extender
panelists
estos
in
términos
order
inclusive
to open
eh,
all these terms
como lo refieren los tratados o los
as the
convenios de
treaties
trabajo
refers
internacional, ¿no?
to? The international treaties refers to.
Básicamente eso sería todo y nuevamente
Basically,
felicitaciones y gracias Gracias.
That's all I wanted to mention, and thank you very much. Thank you, Vice Minister Cauti. So there is a question for the panelists. I don't know if you would like to answer, please.
Yo creo que hay unos muy buenos comentarios que hace Augusto, yo creo que es válido.
I think Augusto mentioned really good comments. The region needs to continue growing. Integration opportunities are there. There are many lessons that we have learned. And I think CAMMA will continue being the best forum to continue growing in a regional level. I don't think we don't have to talk more about that, but it's important to mention that we are there to learn from each other and support each other. And I think we have we are facing some more challenges because COVID-19 hasn't left and it's not going to be left soon. So God knows when we are going to be able to have activities prior to COVID. So we still have to live with this. Thank you, Fernando. We can continue. I don't know if there are other questions, if other participants would like to ask on the other questions.
Sí, Antonio Canale Mayet de Chile, por favor, Antonio. Sí.
Antonio from Chile, please.
Buenas tardes, Roberto. ¿Me oyen?
Sí, perfecto, Antonio, gracias.
Gracias, Roberto. Primero que todo, enviarles a nombre del ministro de Minería de Chile, don Waldo Procuriza, y del subsecretario Irarrázaval, que hoy día no nos pueden acompañar por estar en una sesión especial del Senado de la República. Por lo tanto, mandan sus saludos y sus felicitaciones a los organizadores y a ti, Roberto, por organizar este evento. La verdad es que desde marzo a la fecha, la ayuda de CAMMA y los foros, distintos foros en los que hemos participado todos, bilateralmente o como región, han sido muy provechosos para compartir experiencias y para copiar o para implementar las buenas experiencias de otros países. Yo siempre agradezco las buenas palabras que el viceministro Benalcázar dice sobre el caso chileno y cómo compartimos nuestra experiencia, pero también somos nosotros afortunados de recibir el input de países como Ecuador, como Perú, como Argentina y otros que nos entregan también la manera en que ellos han sido exitosos en sus realidades particulares y también la nuestra. No lo sabemos todo, por cierto, y ha sido muy provechoso, así que aprovecho siempre agradecerlo públicamente. Poco que agregar en cuanto a la temática. Yo creo que estamos todos todavía adaptándonos a los efectos del COVID. Es un mensaje esperanzador especialmente para Chile, el repunte que ha tenido el precio de los commodities que mostraba el viceministro Benalcázar muy bien en su presentación. Previamente, a pesar de los stocks mundiales de los commodities, la guerra comercial entre China y Estados Unidos tenía países y economías como la nuestra con un precio artificial que no nos permitía obtener los resultados esperados. Y hoy día, a pesar de lo malo del COVID, eso nos da una esperanza que la minería puede ser, o es ciertamente el sector que va a permitir el reimpulso de nuestras economías una vez que la situación, entre comillas, se normalice. Lo otro que hemos visto como un aspecto nuevo, o más bien algo que ha acelerado un proceso que ya venía desde cierto tiempo, y esta sería mi pregunta específicamente para el secretario Lefebvre, una pregunta más académica que práctica. Durante el año 2019 recibimos a muchos de los países de CAMMA que son miembros de APEC, en Chile, en Copiapó, para nuestro evento APEC, en el que presentó el IGF este texto New Tech New Deal, sobre los impactos de la automatización, la robotización en minería. Y vemos que por lo menos en el caso de Chile, si bien los procesos ya apuntaban hacia la automatización, esta consecuencia del COVID ha acelerado mucho los procesos, sobre todo en una región donde la fuerza laboral todavía no se ha adaptado al reemplazo que va a provocar la automatización de los procesos. En ese sentido, el plan de minerales y metales canadienses sí contempla este eje como un importante desarrollo para la industria minera local. Y me gustaría preguntarle al secretario Lefebvre y también a Radford si es que ellos avisoran un aceleramiento de la automatización en los procesos y si el impacto de esta podría, a pesar de nuevamente la minería ser el motor de crecimiento luego de la pandemia, generar alguna condición de problemas de empleabilidad u otros en sectores que no están tan formados para este tipo de labores. Eso, Roberto, muchas gracias.
Activities.
It's just related to the acceleration of the process of remote work and automatization of mining in general. We know that the Canadian plan has parts that that address this, but have you seen that this is going to move more quickly going forwards after the pandemic, and if that will have an effect on what you're planning to do? And the same to Greg, because the analysis the IGF made with the New Tech New Deal document encompasses more than the Latin American region, also Africa and other regions. So if he has a vision of this becoming a problem much sooner than what we expected.
Well, that's a great question. Certainly, I think when I speak with the people in the industry, automation and what happened with COVID-19, it's giving the markets and certainly the private industry, obviously, food for thought that they need to obviously go accelerate in the sector, how to best protect their employees at the same time. And at the end of the day, we need to have that technology, and that technology exists, as we already know. We see this as I think COVID-19 is going to be accelerating certainly the push towards automation. But people are always afraid, right? To say automation that will be taking jobs away from people. At the end of the day, we actually see this in Canada. This is a big opportunity because I think this will create new jobs. This basically, we will need people that are actually going to be, using the vehicles, they're basically manning those vehicles, as we say, from a remote location. We need people to create that technology as well. So actually, instead of possibly people going in the mines with obviously forks and drills, we're going to, and obviously the big machinery that we see nowadays, we're going to be just seeing new ways of doing that. So accelerating certainly the new technology that we're already seeing. And so in Canada, we're actually supporting this new technology. We have, in my area here, there's a gold mine in Chapleau, the Borden mine, that's basically all electric mine. So that's the first of its kind here recently here in certainly in Canada. So actually our government supported them with an investment, or actually a subsidy of $5 million, just to get that technology up, and so that we have first people that are actually using it. And so, but we see again the automation, and COVID-19 has just basically supported and basically ensured that that support will continue, and the mining companies are looking at this a lot more seriously and a lot more quickly. At the same time as we talk about automation, and it comes all the clean tech, certainly the machinery, and certainly obviously the batteries. So we see the circular economy. Basically, we need to use minerals and metals in that technology that we need to mine more. So I always say the mining industry is at the forefront of certainly accelerating battery vehicles, because it's certainly at a large scale, because we'll be the first ones where it makes a lot of economic sense to invest in that technology, because we need that technology to advance. So yeah, so just very quickly, we see this accelerating very quickly. Thank you.
Gracias, Paul. Greg, no sé si alcanzaste a escuchar. Did you hear the question from Antonio?
I lost audio for a minute, but I think I got the gist of it, and I was able to hear Paul's answer. I would just like to echo what Paul said, is that we find the same thing, And reference to the new tech new deal work that the IGF is doing, automation is advancing at a rapid pace. The mining sector is spending a lot of money on automation. There's some of the large companies have full innovation teams that are looking at technology. And what we find is that it's been moving, it was moving fast and almost exponentially fast over the past number of years. And the situation with COVID and the pandemic, I agree fully with what Paul was saying in that it will speed things up. But I think the speed and the pace was fast before that, much more so than 10 years ago, Paul. When you say that, like over the past 5 years, it's really moved fast. And as you said, clean tech is important. You know, remote control centers is, you know, we've got in Western Australia, you have people operating, you know, almost entire mines from 300 kilometers away. You know, that was happening before the pandemic. And so with the issue of health and safety and, you know, social distancing, I think that's just going to continue. And with automation and new technology, you know, some of it's health and safety issues, trying to keep people, you know, if you're removing people from the mine face, you're protecting them and you're providing greater safety. In situations like this, for a situation like a pandemic, if you're able to have an automated mine, you're able to operate in these conditions, and you don't necessarily have to shut down because you're able to still maintain some health and safety. That said, it's different in every country, and employment in the mining sector is a really important component. And so you have that a bit of a conflict between employment and automation. And in some countries, you know, they just, you know, in some countries it's conducive to that. Paul mentioned, you know, fully electrified mine. Well, in order to do that, you have to have a very completely reliable energy source, right? And you can't, you know, you have to have cheap energy, you have to have reliable energy. And in some countries you don't have that. And some operations are in remote areas. So in an area where you have that, and let's say an underground mine that's completely electrified in Canada, automation will go faster. But you know, an underground mine in a remote area that doesn't have that power source wouldn't be able to automate as fast. And so we're seeing it differently, but we see it moving very fast as well.
Okay. Bueno, muchas gracias, Greg. Gracias nuevamente.
Thank you very much, Greg, Antonio, for all the questions and the answers as well. I don't know if some of the panelists would like to add something else.
Fernando.
Roberto, I just wanted to mention two more things before. Thank you to IGF and the Executive Secretariat team and the support team, Hugo Nelson, yourself, and all that have helped us, because the platforms are not easy to handle. And I think we were very successful. Almost 200 people were here. And I also want to mention that CAMMA still has some months more before the Secretariat change. So let's keep working together. So when Brazil takes it, it continues the work that we have been doing for the development of mining industry, of mining sector in the region. Thank you very much, and we will always look ways to grow together. Thank you all of you. I just wanted to highlight the collaboration that CAMMA has on the Latin America organism of mining, or also called LAMI. LAMI has an agreement with CAMMA, the Technical Secretariat, and together we have worked together to organize this event. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, IGF. Thank you, CAMMA. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thanks to all of you that were here today, and I hope we can meet together very soon. Thank you very much.